were 5 friends: Mike, Sarah, Ben, Emily, and me, Alex. It was a weekend getaway, a chance to escape the city's suffocating grip. Mike, ever the adventurer, stumbled upon this haunted campsite rumor online. Naturally, we had to check it out. The drive was long, the GPS playing a distorted version of our usual road trip playlist. We brushed it off as a glitch, but a cold unease settled in my stomach. The further we ventured, the denser the forest became. Sunlight barely filtered through the thick canopy, and the air hung heavy with an oppressive silence. As we reached the haunted campsite, a clearing surrounded by gnarled, ancient trees etched with strange symbols, the silence became suffocating. Setting up camp felt like trespassing on forbidden ground. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves sent shivers down my spine. We tried to maintain a cheerful facade, but the tension was thicker than the wood smoke curling from our crackling fire. Mike, ever the jokester, started with ghost stories, the usual fare of vengeful spirits and restless souls. Then, Sarah, usually the voice of reason, confessed to seeing a flicker of movement in the dense trees beyond the firelight. It could have been a deer, she reasoned, but doubt hung in the air. As the night deepened, the fire cast grotesque shadows on the surrounding trees. Ben, ever paranoid, shone his giant flashlight around, claiming he saw shadowy figures lurking just out of sight. It felt like the trees themselves were watching us, their gnarled branches resembling bony fingers reaching for the moonlit sky. Then, the real terror began. A low growl, unlike anything I'd ever heard, echoed through the woods. It sent chills down my spine and caused the hairs on the back of my neck to stand on end. We huddled closer to the fire, hearts pounding against our ribs. The growl came again, closer this time, followed by the unmistakable sound of snapping twigs. Panic surged through me. We grabbed whatever we could use as weapons: a rusty hatchet, a discarded beer bottle, a stray branch. Emily, bless her tech-savvy soul, turned on a portable speaker and blasted heavy metal music, hoping to scare away whatever lurked in the darkness. But the growling persisted, a maddening counterpoint to the music. Mike, ever the brave one or maybe the most terrified, decided to investigate. We protested, but against the deafening growl and Emily's pounding music, our voices were lost. He grabbed Ben's flashlight and, with a shaky breath, ventured into the darkness. The light beam danced crazily as his hand trembled. We held our breaths, the silence amplifying the snap of every twig under his feet. The music cut out abruptly. Emily swore, fumbling with the speaker. In the sudden silence, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night. It was Mike's voice, filled with terror, echoing through the forest. Adrenaline surged through us, fear paralyzing us for a moment. Then, as one, we charged into the darkness, the remaining firelight casting an eerie glow on our panicked faces. We stumbled through the woods, Ben's flashlight our only guide. The scream didn't repeat, just an unnerving silence, broken only by our ragged breaths. We found nothing, no sign of a struggle, no discarded flashlight, no sign of Mike. It was as if he'd vanished into thin air. Panic turned to despair. Sarah, usually so strong, broke down sobbing. Emily, tears streaming down her face, kept muttering about malfunctioning GPS and glitches in the music. We stumbled back to the campsite, fear clinging to us like a second skin. We huddled together, our backs against each other, seeking comfort in the meager warmth of the dying fire. Hours passed, each tick of my watch an eternity. We dared not sleep, haunted by the image of the dark woods and Mike's terrifying scream. Just as dawn began to paint the sky with a faint light, we heard a rustling in the bushes. We held our breath, every nerve on edge. A figure emerged from the trees, stumbling towards us. Our hearts hammered against our ribs. Was it Mike? A monstrous creature from the woods? As the figure drew closer, we saw it was him, Mike, but different. His clothes were ripped and dirty, his eyes bloodshot and glazed with a strange terror. He didn't recognize us. His voice was a ragged whisper, incoherent and filled with fear. He mumbled about the others and the voices we tried to comfort him, but his gaze was distant, haunted. It was as if he'd seen something beyond human comprehension. Sarah, her practical side kicking in, suggested we pack up and leave immediately. But the car's battery was dead. Emily swore it was fully charged when we arrived. We were stranded, With no way to call for help, our phones were inexplicably out of service. As we debated our next move, the growling returned, this time louder and closer. It seemed to circle us, the sound reverberating through the dense trees. We huddled together, our makeshift weapons clutched tightly. The fire had long since died, and we were left in near darkness, the pale light of dawn barely penetrating the thick canopy above. Suddenly, Ben's flashlight flickered and died. Panic set in. We were plunged into darkness, the growling now accompanied by the sound of rustling leaves and snapping twigs. The fear was palpable, a living entity wrapping itself around us, squeezing the breath from our lungs. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure dart between the trees. It was quick, almost too quick to be human. My heart raced as I realized we were not alone. Sarah clutched my arm, her nails digging into my skin, as she too saw the figure. We decided to make a run for it. Staying put was not an option. We grabbed what little we could carry and headed back towards the path we had come. The forest seemed to close in around us, the trees twisting and contorting, blocking our way. The growling followed us, a constant reminder of the unseen presence lurking just out of sight. Mike, now somewhat coherent, led the way. He seemed to have a sense of direction, driven by a primal instinct to survive. We stumbled through the forest, the growling ever present, the shadows playing tricks on our minds. Hours passed in a blur of fear and exhaustion. The sun was now high in the sky, but the forest remained dark and oppressive. Just as we were about to give up hope, we stumbled upon a dilapidated cabin. It looked abandoned, but it was shelter. We barricaded ourselves inside, using whatever we could find to block the doors and windows. The growling was now outside, circling the cabin. We huddled together, the fear a tangible force pressing down on us. Mike, now lucid, told us what he had seen. He spoke of shadowy figures, whispering voices, and a presence that seemed to watch him from the darkness. He believed we had disturbed something ancient and malevolent. As night fell, the growling intensified. It was joined by whispers, faint and indistinct, coming from all directions. We were trapped, with no way to call for help and no idea how to escape. The cabin felt like a prison, the walls closing in around us. Then, in the dead of night, the door burst open. A figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the moonlight. It was tall, with glowing eyes and an aura of malevolence. We screamed, scrambling to get away, but there was nowhere to go. The figure stepped forward, and the growling stopped. The whispers fell silent. It raised a hand, and we felt a wave of cold wash over us, freezing us in place. The figure spoke, its voice a raspy whisper, telling us we had trespassed on sacred ground and must leave or face the consequences. As suddenly as it had appeared, the figure vanished. The growling and whispers resumed, but now they seemed distant, fading into the night. We knew we had to leave, but we were paralyzed by fear. Just as dawn broke, we mustered the courage to leave the cabin. The forest seemed less oppressive in the daylight, but the fear lingered. We made our way back to the campsite, where our car miraculously started. We didn't question it, we just wanted to get as far away as possible. As we drove away, the forest seemed to watch us, its ancient trees whispering secrets we would never understand. We vowed never to speak of that night again, but the memory lingered, a haunting reminder of the terror we had faced. We had survived, but we were forever changed. The forest had left its mark on us, a scar that would never fully heal. We were no longer the same 5 friends who had set out on a weekend adventure. We had faced the unknown and lived to tell the tale, but the darkness had followed us, a shadow we could never escape.